Baker Show. Seeking answers to age-old questions. Deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back. I'm your host for the next 2 hours. I'm Kev Baker, and you are tuned in live to tonight's Kev Baker Show right here on TFR Live, Truth Frequency Radio. So then, I hope you've all had a good weekend. I hope you all survived today's solar eclipse. You know, we've been talking about it for weeks, and now it has come and it has gone. We're going to be getting into that in just a moment with tonight's special guest and, of course, more of a co-host on a Monday and a Wednesday right here on KBS. And that is, of course, Anthony Patch. And Anthony Patch, you can find his work over at anthonypatch.com. He spent 27 years as a paramedic up in Oakland, and more recently he's an author, researcher and public speaker. He's the editor-in-chief of Entangled magazine. He's putting together a conference as well. And of course, like I say, you can find all of this over at anthonypatch.com, including his books that he has there too. And Tony, Johnny Whistles will be joining us later on in the show. But I hope you've had a nice weekend, time to recover, and time for this eclipse today.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks, Kev. It's always good to be back with you, and I apologize to the audience for my banging on the keyboard. That was rather rude of me.
I thought one of Bill Gates's mosquitoes has made its way in the window. You were frantically trying to kill it, but all is good, Tony. All is good. Yeah,
you know, we had some issues. I hate to even bring it up again, but they slammed my computer, of course, 30 minutes before the show comes on the air. So I guess I was taking it out on the poor keyboard. But we're all good. We're here. We'll talk a little bit about the non-event, the eclipse, and we're going to get into 5G again because we must, and we got some clips to play, and we're gonna talk about the Internet of all things. You know, we hear about the Internet of things, but our good friend Sydney, our engineer buddy, that we developed the threat matrix diagram and process that he has presented to his national engineering organization. He calls it the Internet of all things, and I think that is totally appropriate. Go ahead, my friend.
All things, including us, because this is the full surveillance grid as well, Anthony. And not only that, with the nanotechnology that we undoubtedly have floating about in our bloodstreams as it is, I mean, we're looking at full integration into this thing sometime soon, willingly or unwillingly. And we'll get into that as the show progresses, but it would be remiss of us, right, if we did not mention this eclipse, this once in a century, once in a lifetime event that happened today. And I was watching, I think it's Sloosh, it's called, it's one of the online observatories. And
Say that again?
Sloosh, I think it's Sloosh, I think that's what it's called.
I thought you were swearing again.
No, I wouldn't do that on air, Anthony. But yeah, like I was advising people to do anyway, right? I was a bit envious. I wasn't anywhere near totality. So I'd thrown my teddy in the corner and I was telling people, stay indoors, far safer, watch it on the live streams. NASA had a stream up as well. And Tony, you know, for all the mocking that I made of this astronomical event today, when totality did occur, and with the level of kind of cameras that we have in the year 2017, when that totality occurred and the full moon was blocking out the face of the sun, you get that corona that, or what is it, the Ouroboros, the kind of snake eats its own tail effect. But this time, you could actually see, you could physically see some of the jets of plasma coming off and going back to the surface of the sun. And from a geek point of view, somebody that loves space, it was amazing to watch that level of detail, Tony.
Yeah, and if we think back to the time of Einstein, they used an eclipse to, quote, prove the theory of relativity insofar as gravity, according to Einstein, gravity bending light as light passes by large celestial bodies. So they used in the... Yeah, go ahead.
Wasn't that Sirius or something that we seen from beyond the sun? Its light came round it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think today as well they were saying Sirius was visible in the sky, Venus and another one. And I'm just expecting, I haven't looked yet, Tony, but you know when we go to YouTube, these planets will be deemed UFOs, right?
Well, YouTube land is all honest. It's all truth. There's no fear there, and there's no distortion.
Now, I did feel compelled today, though, and it's my dark sense of humour, folks, but I'll share it with you. Our good researcher, our link finder, Mr. Alistair, he was sending me links as this was going on, and there was an earthquake occurred at Yellowstone Park. Now, I was actually more shocked at the fact that people had chosen to go to Yellowstone Park, a volcano of all places, to watch the eclipse. Now, there's nothing new, folks, about earthquakes up at Yellowstone. There's 1,400 been recorded, I think, from June or July time. So there is a swarm going on there just now. But me, with my dark sense of humour, I was kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, you know, everyone's been going on about this panic that may or may not happen because of all this displacement of people. And you can just picture how people were reacting. You're up at the top of Yellowstone and the earth starts shaking. That would have been a sight to see. But, you know, Tony, they're saying this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, this whole moon blocking out the sun, the way it crossed over America like that. But over here in Scotland, you know, I suppose it's more of an event when we actually get to see the sun in the sky. And Scotty Lopez, he suffered a similar fate today as well, because he actually went outside to try and film the eclipse. And of course, the cloud cover was so much so that unfortunately you didn't get much of a view of anything. But it was quite spectacular when the places around the country were thrown into kind of darkness. And I think Tony's having some problems here with his Skype, but we'll get him back momentarily. But, you know, how was this eclipse for you? Were any of yous out there in the path of totality? Anything like that? I remember we had one over here in Scotland when I was very young. I believe it was in the 80s sometime. And, you know, there was no kind of HD camera shots like we were seeing today or anything like that. And I don't believe it was totality that we were in. But it is. It's something to see. And the Sky News in the UK, they were making a very big hullabaloo about all of this because they were kind of talking about, they were going to speak to people watching the event and see how they felt spiritually pre and post eclipse. I mean, come on. I know I kind of milked it on Freaky Friday, but the mainstream media, they truly were taking it to the next degree. But Anthony, I was just sharing my dark sense of humour there and my almost laughter at the thought of people gathering at Yellowstone Park for an eclipse and then the ground starts shaking beneath their feet. Oh, that must have been funny.
I mean, pick a great spot. I mean, come on, use some common sense. Well, there were a bunch of people that went up to the top of the Great Divide, as they call it in the United States, the Rockies. Took a bunch of buses up there to go pray to the sun. So I don't know. It's much ado about nothing. I feel sorry, as I said on our show on Friday, that all these small towns that have been inundated by thousands and thousands of people coming in as early as Wednesday and Thursday last week, they were streaming in to these little towns, especially on the Oregon coast, and just overrunning the places. Can you imagine the litter, the destruction, the trashing of those little towns? All those people leaving, and they're leaving all their garbage behind. Nobody thinks about that kind of stuff. But the infrastructure is kind of what we're talking about tonight, and the damage that must be wrought on these small town infrastructures. You know, that's just something that they don't even bother to talk about in the mainstream media. And again, it's much ado about nothing. People should have just stayed home and watched it on their computers.
And you know, Tony, from a scientific point of view, you were mentioning Einstein and how he used this to almost prove his theory of relativity and gravity, the bending of light round objects. Now, today's event, I've not really checked on this, but I would imagine the space agencies over in Europe, NASA as well, there are bound to be some kind of experiments they would be wanting to carry out when this is happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's always this opportunity to study the corona, which is what you were saying in terms of plasma, the coronal mass ejections, the energy coming off of the surface of the sun, and the temperatures, being able to measure the heliosphere and the corona and the surface of the sun. So those kinds of instrumentations can be done during an eclipse that are unique, but they are planning on launching geosynchronous satellites above and beyond what they already have monitoring the sun, but satellites that will actually be positioned so that they create an artificial eclipse. Now, it's not an eclipse that's visible from the Earth, but an eclipse that is visible from the satellites themselves. So picture this. You have the sun, and then you have a nearby to the sun geosynchronous satellite in position that acts as a shield, acts like the moon, to eclipse the sun for a second satellite that is in alignment with the first one, so that the second one is experiencing the eclipse. So if you were standing on that second satellite, you would actually have an eclipse produced by the first satellite acting as a shield.
I was going to say, will that protect it from obviously some of the radiation that's going to be coming off of there as well, right?
Yeah, and it's a smart idea because the satellites we already have orbiting the sun are always getting hit hard with streams of charged particles.
I like that idea, Tony. That is pretty cool physics. And, you know, when you look at some of these satellite images of the sun, I'm sure a lot of them can be put down to anomalies that are known probably within the software and the hardware itself. But there's always these questionable images where you see almost craft-like objects around the sun. And you know how I love to go to the TV shows? Stargate Universe, Tony. This is how they basically powered their ships. They would visit the local star, harness that power coming off of it, and bada bing, bada boom, off you go. Deep space flight in the room.
Yeah, and, you know, one of the things we talked about last week was Cassini and the fact that the orbiter, that it's going to, impact Saturn, that it's so far from the sun that the solar panels really are not effective at that distance, at that range. So if you're talking about using the sun for power, you have to do it when you're relatively close to the sun and then be able to carry that with you in the form of, batteries, if you will, but more specifically fuel cells.
So is that why a solar sail is quite impractical then, Tony? It'd be good to start with, but then what's going to drive it later on? Would you have ions hitting it, something like that?
Yeah, an ion drive is a very simplistic, if you will, rocket motor. It's ejecting charged particles, ions, which are really just a material that has its electrons stripped from it. But you have a plasma drive is really a better way of talking about it rather than an ion drive, because plasma is an ionized gas, and you can do that with virtually any material, any gas. But a plasma drive is really what you're talking about with that. And that would take over from a solar panel that is a solar sail, not CEL, but SAIL. And that literally is taking the charged particles that are streaming off of the sun and using those to strike a sail, just like if you have a sailboat, and driving the craft using those charged particles streaming off the sun. Now, that's a very inefficient, you're not getting much acceleration from that. But in terms of something that would be driven, that would require no fuel, and you don't care about the time factor of acceleration and then distance. But yes, once you get to the outer reaches of the solar system, then you need to supplement or augment that using a plasma drive.
Love it. And of course, I think if I was building some kind of secret tech, Tony, one of these like capsules or flying things for the secret space program, I'm going down the road of the EM drive, the electromagnetic drive, highly theoretical. People are working on it. And if you could get one of them going, I think we would really see some advancements then. But then again, the secret space program probably already have it, Tony.
Well, I like your line of discussion. This is a new area for us to talk about, and that is if you were to use the system of the electric universe to power a spacecraft. Let's look at the sun as an example. The sun is absorbing from the cosmos the plasma that fills the, quote, void. It is constantly attracting through electromagnetism. It is literally drawing plasma to itself as a source of fuel. Now, if you do the same scenario with a spacecraft and you are able to inject the plasma, and yes, it's very thin, I mean, it's virtually invisible to us, but plasma does exist. So like a jet aircraft engine that is drawing in oxygen and then igniting that with a fuel, which is typically, kerosene, if you will, jet fuel, JP4 in most cases, and igniting that oxygen, which then spins a turbine, which is nothing more than an air pump. You can do essentially the same thing in space if you were to draw in plasma and be able to compress it and then eject it out a nozzle from the opposite end of the spacecraft. You would have an inexhaustible supply of fuel because you're always drawing it in from the cosmos.
And of course, Tony, DARPA and all of these scientists at the very top of this kind of special ops or kind of black projects, if we'll call it that, they know full well what they're playing with in space. And I imagine that there are craft out there, or at least theoretical kind of propulsion systems that are dealing exactly in this because they know it's an electric universe. I get they hide that, but they can utilize that. They could tell the public X, Y, or Z, and people will swallow it without ever cracking a light to the true nature of space. So I imagine that this stuff definitely must be out there.
Yeah, I think it can be surmised that the advanced projects are operating in those realms of experimental engines and craft. But let's look at it from a very natural, if you will, simplistic version. Let's talk about Saturn again, and Saturn and the Earth and Mars in the golden age of Kronos scenario, in which they traveled together enveloped in a plasma, in a ionized gas cloud that enveloped the three planets, and that they were attracted by way of electromagnetism to our present solar system by the existing planets and the sun itself, that the bodies attracted one another. If you apply that to a spacecraft that is able to utilize the magnetic attraction of planets, moons, suns, stars, then you don't have to have fuel, and you don't have to have a rocket motor, so to speak. You don't need an engine. You don't need a propulsion system, because you would be attracting your spacecraft to heavenly bodies. Rather than thrust, you're using attraction. Now that is a much more efficient scenario.
And we were playing some strange sounds recorded from space on Freaky Friday. It was absolutely mind-blowing, Anthony, but one of the things that came out from that is that each of these planets, due to their mass, their spin, everything else, they have a unique frequency, an absolutely unique frequency. And that was kind of blowing my mind as well. And it sent me thinking back to Tesla, because he was the man that talked about vibration and frequency and unlocking the secrets of the universe. And if I ever get a working time machine, right, and I know we'll get a shot of one day, Anthony, right, we can go back, we can pick up von Braun just when he was taking over at NASA, dump him back at the time of Tesla, take Tesla forward to the space race, bada bing, bada boom, there we go. By the time we come back here, I'll have all my sci-fi dreams, Tony.
Well, I got to tell you, I have a time machine in my garage. Do you want to borrow it?
Oh, you just know, right? There's going to be YouTube videos now saying that you're an agent, you're a man in black, and not only that, you've got your own time machine. You know it.
Oh, yeah. Well, those guys out in YouTube land love to listen to our conversations, Kevin. You know, they take their cues for what are they going to build their next video around. So they listen to us and they go, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Or that's really cool. They dug up that really cool scientific study. I never heard about that. They didn't have to do the research. So they just take it from us and they run off and they make their videos, and they have 160,000 subscribers who eat it up, and they make, you know, $10,000 off a video from YouTube because they put out a bunch of nonsense that has really no relevance to what you and I said other than the topic itself.
And, you know, talking about revenue off videos, I must be doing something. We're all doing something really wrong here, Tony, because we do what we do. We post the information. I think we do quite well. But then you need to put it into perspective. And love or hate the guy, Milo, he was on Alex Jones not long ago. They were talking about this kind of adpocalypse where YouTubers were being demonetized and stuff like that. And Milo just happened to throw into the conversation that he had seen his revenue drop from what he usually got at, wait for this, $20,000 for a month down to next to nothing. Oh. $20,000 in a month. Listen, that is not me hating on the guy. Fair play to him if he can make that money. That's the kind of, just to give people an idea that, you know, there is big money to be made out there. And Milo's doing some serious work. I mean, he's speaking out against this loony left and all that stuff. Love him or hate him, like I say. But there's others out there who are just putting out absolute nonsense. And listen, hands up, from time to time, I've got it wrong, but I try to correct it. And I don't knowingly sell my soul like that for clicks, Tony. But I tell you what, some money, eh?
That is, and neither you or I are making any kind of money to speak of. We're just barely scraping by. And I tell the audience that quite honestly and frankly, because we don't do it for the money, and we're not out there trying to put out a bunch of nonsense. But you and I privately, and I hope you don't get upset, I'm going to share this with our audience because they are why we are here. So I'm going to share with the audience a private conversation you and I had, and we were kidding around about, hey, why don't we enlist our audience to go along with a joke? Kind of like we're going to play a game on AI, play a game on YouTube. And just for one show, we're going to just put out the most nonsensical Inquirer magazine type stuff that we can come up with. Just totally made up nonsense. Hopefully funny. But put it out there and just see what happens on YouTube land. Put it out there and see how many clicks we get. Not because we're trying to make a whole bunch of money, but just to see what would happen if we could be as ridiculous as some of these people that you and I don't cite by name, but everybody knows who they are.
Absolutely. And, you know, Tony, I think it would be a great idea. And you just know, but it would sicken us of YouTube because we would see that when you go down that road and you sensationalize and you hype things up, you get maybe 10 times the clicks. But like I say, we do try and stick to the truth here. I say try because none of us are perfect, and we often get fact-checked by the audience, which I love, Tony, because they bring us so much information as well. And we're certainly not perfect, but we definitely are at the tip of the spear. No, we're not special forces, are we?
No, we're just special. We ride around in the short little yellow buses.
But listen, this segment of radio here, I mean, this qualifies how we have the audacity and the hubris to say that we ourselves are theoretical physicists, right? Because this is all they do. They sit around, they throw around ideas. Tonight we've been talking about space, propulsion systems, that kind of stuff. They get letters after their name, they get rolled out onto the mainstream, and they are the voice of authority. If they say it's so, it's so. If they say it's crap, it's crap. And that's why I think we definitely can qualify ourselves as theoretical physicists, Mr. Batch.
I think so. I mean, it's all theory anyway, so who's to say who is the better theorist? And I think we think more freely than those guys because they're stuck in the mainstream science paradigms, whereas you and I have the ability to think objectively, think differently, yes, outside the box, we can step back and look at things that are going on. And I think we can come up, and we do come up with better theories than those people that are trapped in mainstream science.
Absolutely. They have got the shackles of the grant givers and the money around them, and that is what kind of keeps them in line. I imagine some of them would listen to the likes of myself, Mr. Patch, and you out there, and absolutely wish they could actually just sit and talk about this kind of thing as well. They'll never get funded for it, though, and that is so heartbreaking. It's unbelievable. But when we come back after the break, we're going to be getting into a more serious side of things now, because, again, we're going to be hammering home all the details about this rollout of 5G that is set to affect us all. Thanks for listening. We'll be back after the break. And Johnny Whistles will be joining us later in the show. Don't go anywhere. More from Mr. Patch coming up.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of tonight's broadcast of the Kev Baker Show, right here on Truth Frequency Radio. And I'm coming to you live from Glasgow, Scotland, broadcasting on www.tfrlive.com. My co-host and good friend Johnny Whistles, he'll be with us for hour number 2. Can't wait to catch up with him. And of course, tonight we're joined by Mr. Anthony Patch. Myself and Anthony and John have joined forces on a Monday and a Thursday. And of course, you can catch me co-hosting for Mr. Patch on a Friday right here on the same network. And in the first segment of the show, I really loved that. We had a geek out session. We were kind of theorizing and batting about ideas about propulsion systems, stuff like that, all spawned from a conversation about today's once-in-a-lifetime eclipse. And over recent months, myself, Anthony, and we even had Max Egan on the show the other night. He is, I'm glad to see, hammering home this point as well. We're talking about the 5G rollout and the implications that it's going to have on us all. Now, a lot of talk is made of the fact that 5G uses a millimeter wave, and rightly so as well, because the jury's kind of out on how that affects humans. Some experts say it merely goes just to the first layer of skin. Others say that the radiation coming off of this will go 8 millimeters deep. So this is something we really all have to pay very, very close attention to, because it's not coming. It's here. And for some time, my internet service provider here in the UK, in Glasgow I am, Virgin Media, Richard Branson's company, they offer 320 megabit broadband right here in Smart City Glasgow. But it's my router, and it has got a 2G and a 5G channel. They future-proofed that a long time ago. They've always known that this 5G is coming, is my point. And when it comes to this millimeter wave, it is different from the kind of antennas and the stuff we've got just now, because they are going to have to absolutely swamp areas with new technology called small cell networks. And this is so, you don't lose reception when you pass behind a tree. Take a listen to this, and this will explain what the small cell networks are, and we'll get into it with Anthony.
Today's wireless networks rely on large, high-powered cell towers to broadcast their signals over long distances. But higher-frequency millimeter waves have a harder time traveling through obstacles, which means if you move behind one, you lose your signal. Small cell networks would solve that problem, using thousands of low-power mini base stations. These base stations would be much closer together than traditional towers, forming a sort of relay team to transmit signals around obstacles. This would be especially useful in cities. As the user moved behind an obstacle, his smartphone would automatically switch to a new base station in better range of his device, allowing him to keep his connection.
So there you go, folks. This is what they're calling small cell stations. And like I say, they are going to be popping up everywhere, because they're saying they're going to need these things probably 250 meters apart. And Anthony, we were covering this kind of topic, I believe, on your show, and some of the dangers involved, and some of the kind of readings that were being picked up by people, activists who were concerned about this sort of technology.
Yeah, we were mentioning this Friday following Max Egan's excellent presentation on Thursday on your show of 5G technology being rolled out. And, the typical scenario is a rollout for commercial purposes occurring around 2020. Between now and 2020, they'll reach their peak distribution of antennas. Well, that's really for public consumption, because the rollout is happening much quicker than that. The timetable has definitely been stepped up. And in a few minutes, we're going to play another clip in which the president of the United States, Donald Trump, is being presented some eye-opening facts and figures and the impetus behind the rollout. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But yes, the power readings that we have observed from activists that are taking actual meters, so to speak, and registering not just the wavelength, not just the frequency, but the actual wattage that is coming off of cell towers that are lined up next to homes and businesses. Now, just to give you a number for the audience that they can wrap their head around, if you have a wattage that is between 3 and 6, and I'm being very elementary here, folks, between 3 and 6, that's where you have biological damage occurring. They're getting numbers in the 600, 700, 800, and 900 wattage range. Now, these are microwatts, but I don't want to make it too technical. What I'm getting at here is that if damage biologically is done at 6, and you're seeing 600 on the meter from across the street, and you have businesses that are directly beneath that tower, and they haven't even ramped up the output on these broadcast antennas. This is just standard 4G and 5G transmission taking place. They have enough power going in terms of amperage being fed into the towers to actually convert the towers into microwave broadcast ovens. They can literally cook anybody that they target with these towers. So that's the worst case scenario. We're going to step back from that, and we're going to focus on just 5G and the proliferation of antennas. Go ahead, sir.
I was posting some pictures in the chat room there, and like you say, worryingly, one of these kind of readings was in the 800s. And it's not just us speculating that these things could basically be turned into microwaves, because the second picture that I posted, that is almost proven as evidence as to what we're saying, because the person in the video rightly said that when you're looking at that kind of gauge of cabling, thick black rubber kind of insulation, you're looking at a lot of power in that cable, Anthony, a lot of power indeed. And there's multiple cables, and these things are everywhere. And that's what led us to say that literally they could target people in their neighborhood, triangulate 3 of these things on, and with the power they can use, it's very kind of nefarious kind of purpose, but they have the ability to do it.
Absolutely. And, a couple of years ago, people saw the active denial technology that was rolled out with law enforcement and military for the purpose of dispersing crowds by heating up the interior of the bodies of the protesters, just like a microwave oven. So they had a parabolic dish, like a satellite dish, maybe 2 feet, 3 feet in diameter, mounted on a truck, even handheld, and they would direct microwave energy at the people in the crowds. And these were role-playing. These were military people and civilian volunteers acting as role players in a crowd situation, protesters, and they immediately fled from the direction of the beam because they could literally feel their bodies internally being heated. That's exactly what a microwave does. So when you apply that to the scenario of microwave towers, not just cell towers, but these are literally microwave towers, they can target anybody inside a building and literally cook them. So it's active denial on steroids.
It really is. And I've watched one of these shows about future weapons of war, and this active denial system, this is something that they've invested heavily in. Non-lethal weapons, they call it. But the guy that was being tested on, I mean, like Tony described there, he was jumping out the way of this thing. He literally felt his skin cooking. Now, Tony, I'm going to interrupt for 2 minutes here because we've described the kind of dangers, the energy, the power levels that are being recorded by people. And I want to demonstrate to the listeners out there just the kind of attitude that the government have towards all of this. Now, this comes from 2016 and somebody called Tom Wheeler. He was the chairman of the FCC. And I want you to listen closely to what this character has to say about rolling out 5G, especially near the start, when he's kind of addressing the fact that they're not even going to wait to see what the science is on this. Take a listen to this.
Turning innovators loose is far preferable to expecting committees and regulators to define the future. We won't wait for the standards. We're already seeing the industry gearing up to seize this opportunity. Verizon and AT&T tell us they'll begin deploying 5G trials in 2017, and the first commercial deployments they're talking about are expected in 2020. And we're not done. As part of our July 14 action, we also plan to ask for comments on opening up other high-frequency bands. Many of the high-frequency bands that we will make available for 5G currently have some satellite users, as well as some Defense Department applications, or at least the possibility of future satellite and defense users. This means sharing will be required between satellite and terrestrial wireless, an issue that is especially relevant in the 28 gigahertz band. But if anyone tells you that they know the details of what 5G is going to become, run the other way. If something can be connected, it will be connected. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waterers. We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole provenance of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country. A lot more antenna siting decisions by local governments and tightened our shot clock for siting application reviews. America's local governments will play an important role in determining how we fulfill this national priority. You can be sure of only one thing. The biggest Internet of Things application has yet to be imagined. Tens of billions of dollars in economic activity. And that's damn important.
So there you go, folks. That's the attitude coming from the government just last year. And as the show progresses, and Tony will go on to explain, it's not changed any under the Trump administration. But Tony and the audience out there, I hope you listened and caught the part where he was talking about the fact that this 5G network and the frequencies in use already has military and satellite users. And then he corrects himself to say, and potential military and satellite users. Now, again, this adds weight to my theory that, as I was saying to you before the show, Tony, nothing new with 5G, especially when it comes to the military. And this is another example of where the military have installed, come up with a system, utilized it to its full extent, moved on to the next or a couple of generations down the line, and now we're seeing the commercial, public use of 5G.
Yeah, I'm glad that we have 2 hours today to talk, and we're going to use the balance of the show tonight to talk about 5G. This is absolutely insidious, and it is an existential threat to people, and this is not fear-mongering. We are going to give you the details on 5G. We're going to talk technology today in the nuts and bolts. And when he says, if somebody says they know 5G, run the other way, well, you don't need to run the other way because we're going to provide it to you today. We're going to show you the actual 5G system as what it is technologically and its applications. It's much more than just this microwave scenario. But Kev, you're right. This is the smoking gun. This is 2016. The clip you just played, that's the head of the FCC, and he's talking about a 2020 full rollout. And yet at the same time, he's talking about the fact that the military already has 5G. So we're going to say smoking gun. We're going to say roll the time clock back. It is not 2020. This is just, again, another example of how they tell the public something that is going to happen in the near future when, in fact, it has been in place for many, many years. And, of course, it happens first in the military. We know that the military, and I'm not slamming the military, I'm just saying that they have had this technology for many years. I think that they've had 5G from my research for at least 10 years in the laboratories, which means that probably 8 years in the military rollout itself. So we're going to give you the details on that, but you know what? He says, whatever can be connected will be connected. He's saying hundreds of billions of antennas throughout the world. Okay, we talked about sentient world simulation. We talked about granularity of data. We talked about a digital reality versus an analog reality. This is the Internet of Things, but as our good friend Sid has said, it is the Internet of everything, of all things. So it is the Internet of all things, IOAT, not just the IoT that most of the public and YouTube people put out there. This is the Internet of all things connected by billions of antennas. That's the scenario that he just painted. My question is, in the United States, where's the EPA when you need the EPA? Where's the Environmental Protection Agency when we're talking about protecting people from the dangers of millimeter wave, microwave 5G rollout? Go ahead.
Exactly, Tony. And something else that I want people to take away from this conversation tonight is when you hear about the Internet of Things, it's going to be populated by smart this, smart that, Wi-Fi, hands-free, all that kind of stuff. But never lose sight of the fact that when we're talking about these harmful wavelengths, all of these devices are basically transmitters and receivers. So they themselves, Tony, we're talking about these billions of antennas and everything and fed back into this 5G network. Everything is not only going to be receiving the latest firmware updates and keeping it up to date, but it's going to be sending information as well. And a lot of these things we keep quite close to our person.
Yeah, and when we bring in Johnny in the second hour, let's get into some of those very, quite literally, personal applications and devices that you shared with me before the show. So we'll hold that until Johnny comes in, because I always love his reactions to these things when we talk about it. But let me go back to a couple of notes from this clip you just played. He said that this is a national priority. Think about Trump when he was campaigning, and he has reproduced and restated many of what I'm going to give to you since the campaign, since being elected. And that is this whole banner, the big flag that is being waved in front of the general public, Joe Bag of Donuts out there, is the flag of infrastructure. Infrastructure comes out of Donald Trump's mouth all the time. We need to rebuild the bridges, the highways. We need to rebuild. And everybody claps and applauds and thinks jobs and thinks that, this is great. We're rebuilding America. The whole patriotic wave the flag deal. Okay? I don't have a problem with that. I want the infrastructure built. But that is the cloud cover under which they will roll out, because it's a national priority. The head of the FCC said in 2016, it's a national priority to roll out 5G infrastructure. And we're going to play a clip in which the president is meeting with some people, discussing presenting to him this whole imperative of 5G rollout. So what I'm offering to you folks is another psychological operation, in the sense that they want to wave the banner, the patriotic flag of infrastructure, while underneath that, they're insidiously populating our very homes and businesses with small antennas of 5G rollout so that everything is connected to the internet. So don't fall for the trap where you see the people on TV standing behind Donald Trump and he's doing a town hall and everybody back there is smiling and clapping every time he says infrastructure, because it's covering up the 5G rollout. Go ahead, sir.
Absolutely, and this will roll into the whole smart city kind of scenario as well. In the US, it's got its smart cities. It doesn't have them to seek either. And I always go on about it, but I think it's appropriate that I should be living here at this time in the UK's first smart city. I'm literally, Tony, fully immersed in this, but I've got that clip from Donald Trump right here if you think it's a good time to play it.
Yeah, hold 1 second, just 1 second. I want to finish with this gentleman's statement. Last note, he's emphasizing money. He's talking about tens of billions of dollars in commerce that will result from the rollout of 5G. So he's dangling the carrot of the almighty dollar as justification for rolling out 5G, which has disastrous consequences biologically for all life, not just humans, but animals and plant life as well. So for the sake of billions of dollars, it sounds like Carl Sagan talking about billions of stars in the cosmos, right? Now we're into the billions of dollars and the billions of antennas. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about D-Wave and billions of human brains. Okay, so go ahead, Kev, play that clip.
You know, Tony, we've often spoke about CERN and how they talk about their key to open portals and the key to the abyss. And when it comes to 5G, you know, this 5G, this technology, this radiation could literally be the key to unzipping our double helix, ready for that third strand that you always talk about. And that's just something else for people to bear in mind, because this does affect the DNA. So we're going to play a quick clip now from Donald Trump, and he's getting a presentation about drones, worryingly enough, but take a listen to what he says towards the end.
In a word, I would describe as vision.
So the fully autonomous drone works on behalf of John and the team at Winter Construction. So John, if you want to say a little more to the president about how you've seen that experience been?
We have to go out in the field and survey. 25 years ago, we didn't even know what a cell phone was. 2 weeks of data collection. We look today and we can actually, just our life is kind of evolved around the technology. It's life-changing. This drone is life-changing. We're finding out daily, not in the quarry side of things, but in the construction side of things, and other uses. We've actually started 2 other businesses up off the same drone, just using it in a different way. So it's
and yet right now drones are becoming very powerful too. I see where they're lifting people. I don't know about the level of safety there, but I see that. But also, I guess they're going to be lifting very heavy material at some point.
Yeah, there's an initiative with other companies underway to effectively have delivery done by the drone. This drone in particular is about just being able to collect aerial intelligence in a seamless way and being able to deliver that to the user in a way that they weren't able to accomplish before. So John's able to get that work done in literally minutes after the drone flies, versus usually it would take him days of just manual labor to be able to accomplish that same work.
Fantastic job.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a pleasure.
Randall?
Yes, Mr. President, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about 5G technology in about 2 minutes, okay? Guys like Jeff Immelt, various Internet of Things, drones, autonomous cars are going to require a whole different level of speed and wireless networks. If you come over here, this is a residential neighborhood. If you want to get the kind of speeds required today, these lights are 5G. We have to take fiber to every one of these houses to get that kind of bandwidth. What 5G does, says forget about all that fiber out here. Get fiber to this small cell, which Marcelo is going to show you here. This small cell will broadcast this kind of bandwidth to all these homes, okay? You no longer need to run fiber in here. So you can have speeds that are multiples of what the fastest cable technology can deliver today into the home with wireless technology. If you move into the city, what's happening? If you want to get that bandwidth in there, the same thing. Fiber run to every one of these buildings. It takes a long time digging up roads, bridges, and sidewalks and so forth. 5G says no longer. In fact, all you need are small cells inside the city, and we can light up these buildings here as well, right? And then as you move to Wi-Fi, we have Wi-Fi deployed in these buildings all over the place, so customers moving in and out of the Wi-Fi arrangement. You can see the old big cell technology sitting on top of buildings, broadcasting throughout the city. But now on the street level, the customer is being put on whatever network gives them the fastest speeds. This could be an autonomous car, it could be any number of things. And so as the car moves, it gets moved back and forth between the networks into another 5G deployment, and you're getting these kind of multiple gigabit speeds throughout cities without all the fiber having to be deployed into all these buildings. Really accelerates it, makes us get to the market much faster.
So 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you couldn't have even imagined
Wouldn't have
this.
thought about it. No, sir, we would not have. And this is 2018, we'll deploy this kind of configuration, and the companies in here are, and in 2020, it becomes mobile. And so this handset will be getting.
So there has to be a tremendous construction saving too, ultimately.
It's a huge construction saving. You don't have to deploy all this fiber. You see this little cell site here. You're going from deploying these big cell sites and towers to deploying these all over cities. That's what Marcelo is going to show you, what this technology looks like now.
So, Mr. President, if I can summarize 5G, is $275 billion of investment in the next 7 years, the creation of 3 million new jobs, and a contribution of $500 billion to the GDP of the United States. What is different between 4G and 5G? 4G, those were enormous towers that look quite ugly. We're going to move to deploying millions of this, hundreds of thousands, and then millions of small cells all over the United States. The problem that we have is it takes us 1 year to get a city to give us a permit, but it takes us 1 hour to install them. And unless we can install them real fast, we're going to lose that leadership that we have today. Those huge towers, all it is now, it's just a small cell. You put this on the utility poles, you put it in the cable strands, and that's all we need in order to enable. So when people ask about 5G,
There must be local 5G.
basically we run into trouble with cities, municipalities, counties. Each one has its own idea of how much they should charge, how long should it take.
How much is the federal permit? How long does it take?
Well, this mainly would go down to the cities. But one thing quite well with gas city, there's some cities that start.
We are right on the break. We catch up with Anthony Patch on the other side and Johnny Whistles. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, everyone. We're moving into hour number 2, right here on the Kev Baker Show with me, your host, Kev Baker. We've got Anthony Patch along for the ride tonight. We're getting into 5G before the break. And as promised, Mr. Johnny Whistles is live here on the show. John, welcome to another week of madness right here on the Kev Baker Show. How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Kev, but this 5G that you're talking about, Kev, I'm just wondering just how bad this is going to get, because just before the show I was looking up times. Now, the National Toxicology Programme researchers, they released data in May that showed increases in tumours in male rats that was exposed to cell phone radiation. Now, the rats were exposed to 9 hours of radiation daily and 10 minutes on and 10 minutes off over the whole bodies for 2 years. And they found that increased incidences of rare brain and heart tumours. And that was starting about the federally allowable level of cell phone radiation. Now, if that's what you're allowed to use and you're getting these brain tumours and rare brain diseases, what is 5G going to be doing?
That is brilliant information, Johnny. And Anthony, that just harps back into the FCC, the former chairman, Tom Wheeler, talking about the fact that we don't care about the science of this. This is getting rolled out anyway.
Yeah, he was saying we need to turn the innovators loose. His very words, turn the innovators loose. In other words, let the patients in the insane asylum loose from the asylum and let them run through the streets.
Absolutely. That is literally what he is saying there. And just to go back to the clip we were playing before the break because we didn't quite have enough time to finish it, and it's important to hear Trump's comments at the end. You know, this is the kind of madness, like Johnny was saying here, some of the science that you see coming out. This is why, I mean, just one aspect of why this is very, very serious indeed. It's like the chemtrails, and we had, or sorry, the aerosol spraying. I need to correct myself when I say that chemtrail term now. We were speaking to Dane Wigington on Friday night, and he was painting a very dire picture indeed. And, you know, for as serious a topic as that is, because we all breathe the same air, we're all going to be living in this harmful electromagnetic soup, which is about to be switched on all around us. So back to Donald Trump quickly, then we'll get Anthony back in on all of this 5G stuff.
Municipalities, counties, each one has its own idea of how much they should charge, how long should it take.
How much is the federal permit? How long does that take?
Well, this mainly will go down to the cities. We're working quite well with the FCC.
Problems with certain cities.
There's some cities that takes 30 days, there's some cities that takes 2 years, so it's impossible to do it. So this is why we need to fix this. And that's what 5G, when everybody talks about 5G.
Well, we can do a recommendation to the cities all over the country to get it going, and Gary, maybe they can move it faster. Because this is truly a great process. But why don't we do a very strong letter of recommendation so they can get it done much faster?
There you go. A strong letter of recommendation, Tony, to get this done faster.
Yeah, let's look at it from the perspective of Donald Trump, who is a builder. He is a developer, real estate developer. He's looking at it as jobs, working with contractors, building infrastructure, as we said earlier. He's looking at it from the construction side of the equation and thinking about dollars and jobs, which is fine, which is good. However, it doesn't play out in terms of the detrimental effects it's going to have on people and the environment, as we said. So he's only looking at it from that aspect as a contractor. But what needs to be looked at is the lack of studies, the lack of safety protocols that are put in place. And now when he says a very strong letter, what you can expect to see coming out very, very soon from the president will not be just a strong letter, but an executive order. Because infrastructure is the flag, folks. Got to wave that banner. If you're not for infrastructure build, the build out of it, then you're not a patriot. Okay, that's how it's going to be played. And you will be viewed as not being a patriot, therefore the enemy, if you don't jump on the bandwagon of 5G, because it's part of the infrastructure rebuilding of America. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And of course, what goes hand in hand with 5G, and something that we've covered on the show just a couple of times, Mr. Patch, would be the D-Wave, right? Because these two are joined at the hip. 5G and D-Wave. Well, there's a symbiotic relationship there, isn't there?
There is, and this is where we're going to get into the numbers. So, folks, I'm going to read something to you. I like to give you the punchline, and then we backfill it. So I'm going to give you the punchline. This is from an article that I'm nearly complete in composing that will appear in the September issue of Entangled magazine. And the title of this article is D-Wave, Adiabatic Quantum Computers, 5G Wi-Fi, and the granularity of data within the AI sentient world simulation. It's a long article. I'm going to give you an excerpt from it. We're going to give you some facts and figures from it. Also, we are going to be talking September 16th and 17th, the live stream conference that Kevin and I are putting on will entail 5G as well. So we have a number of people that are going to be speaking at this conference. We'll go into that in a little bit later. I don't want to detract from the punchline here, so right into it. We are talking about the human brain. We're talking about the quantum spin of particles within the human brain. So this is very deep, but I'm going to backfill this. Calculations show that an adult differentiated pyramidal neuron in vivio, which is taking place within a living organism, has approximately 1.3 times 10 to the 9th tubulin dimers incorporated in a cytoskeleton, which are the filaments and tubules of the cytoplasm, microtubules of 56 micrometers in length. This sets limitations on the number of quantum coherent neurons maintaining coherency for 25 milliseconds for conscious events within pyramidal neurons. Pyramidal neurons in the prefrontal cortex are implicated in cognitive ability. These cells play a critical role in complex object recognition within the visual processing areas of the cortex. Now, I'll translate that for you. This is my own article. This is my own information that I've put together, but I'm going to translate it for you. What I'm talking about here is that 5G is the transmission system of D-waves adiabatic quantum computers that directly impact the human brain in changing the way the brain operates. This is manipulation of our consciousness, is what I'm describing for you in that rather complex paragraph. I spell it all out in the Entangled magazine article, how they manipulate our brains, specific to 5G, specific to the quantum computers. Now, there are several foundational articles about mind control that I have published in the June, July, and August issues of Entangled. So if you want the definitive, subscribe to the magazine and you can read the definitive information. This represents hundreds, if not thousands of hours of research, not just by myself, but by Kev Baker and other people that have contributed to this magazine. So we would appreciate your support for all those hours and the information that we bring to you.
You know, Tony, I've peer-reviewed these for you if we're going to carry on our kind of fake PhD scenario that the three of us share here. We really are. One thing you said there, right, and it stood out for me, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners sat up and paid attention as well, or they caught it, that pyramidal neurons. Now, you're the man that's always on about tetrahedrons, right? And now we're on about pyramidal neurons. Got to be a connection there.
Definitely is. And the pyramidal neurons are made of tetrahedrons. We are talking about neurons which are comprised of tetrahedrons at a smaller scale, but at the larger scale of the neuron itself, it quite literally is a tetrahedron. They call it a pyramid, but it is a triangular base, not a square-based pyramid, these neurons. And these have been observed at the macro scale, and they have been proven to exist. And this all goes back to this whole scenario about tetrahedrons making up everything at the quantum scale and the way that the particles are arranged in a tetrahedral pattern all the way out to the cosmos.
Now, this might go a bit geeky, might be going a bit deep, right? But you know my mind that fires off, the quantum mind that it is, here, there, and everywhere. But we've spoken in the past about how the qubits, the arrangement of the qubits, are in the three as opposed to the two. Three of them entangled, and that gives you a feedback loop, Tony. And that enables it to learn and stuff like that. Now, if we're talking here about the brain this time, then are we talking about that being our feedback loop, that third kind of tubulin dimer that makes up this neuron?
Yes, absolutely. Because if you arrange the particles that have quantum spin, if you arrange them in arrangements of a tetrahedron, which is in a balanced arrangement of three, then you are looking at not just a binary programming system, okay, but you're looking at a ternary system. You're looking at a system of -1, 0, and +1, arrangements of three quantum particles. Rather than a binary, we're now into a trinary arrangement of quantum particles.
The reason I try to keep it so kind of lockstep with what we find in the human brain and then looking at the quantum computer is because that's what they modeled it on. And we've often said that the best way to construct something that will hopefully, in their opinion, achieve consciousness is to follow the one working model or the best working model that nature's produced. And that is our brain. the guys behind D-Wave. They studied all of these quantum biology presentations. They knew about all of this pyramidal arrangements. And it can be no mistake then that when they're trying to build something that mimics the brain, our tubulin dimers, our quantum bits, well, Geordie Rose says we hijacked his information on dimensions. They've hijacked the information on the natural formation of a quantum computer in our mind. And they've lined up their qubits exactly the same way.
That's right. They talk about recurrent neural networks. Now, neural, obviously, they're copying the neurons and the connections, the synapses between neurons. So they are modeling the human brain to build not only the programming, arranging of the algorithms into a system that mimics or models the human brain, but the physical construct as well. And we have laid the foundation, folks. I'm talking to the audience. We've laid the foundation for at least 2 years here on the Kev Baker Show and on my show, talking about D-Wave's models of computers. And I'm just going to cite the 10th model of 14, because there are 14 of these. But the 10th model is where we see the absolute specific correlation of the number of qubits in the quantum computer being exactly the same number of tubulin dimers within the human neuron, okay? More specifically, within the tubule, the microtubule that contains the tubulin dimers.
Gets confusing, so, Tony, doesn't it?
It does. So think of a tube that holds the dimers. Within that tube, we're talking about dimers in a quantity of 65,536 dimers. The 10th model of quantum computer has qubits, and there's a one-to-one relationship between the number of qubits in the computer and the number of tubulin dimers in the human brain, which they are modeling. 65,536 qubits in the 10th model of the quantum computer from D-Wave, of which I said there are 14. So, Kev, I'm going to very quickly step back to 5G. 5G, and this is in my article, you can get this in the Entangled magazine. The second model, not the 10th, but the second model of D-Wave computer is a direct match to 5G, because it has, the second model has 256 qubits. That's very small compared to 65,536 at the 10th model. But 5G directly correlates to the 256 qubits. What we're talking about, folks, is the power of 2, multiplication by the power of 2 of qubits and tubulin dimers, and also in 5G, the quadrature amplitude modulation system, the QAM, more specifically the frequency QAM, matches exactly 256 at 5G. If you look up 5G, it'll say 256 QAM or FQM. Now, one last number, I'll let you go, Kev, here. According to D-Wave's own mathematical process for determining the equivalent number of human brains that are equivalent to their computer, the Model 2, 5G, 256 qubits, 256 QAM, and 2 to the 200th power of parallel dimensions equals 3.5 billion human brains in terms of its processing power. So at 5G, they're operating at the equivalent level of 3.5 billion human brains with just the second model of 14 of the D-Wave computers. Go ahead.
Just for people to visualize that, take half the population of planet Earth and then daisy chain them with Ethernets to the back of each other's heads. That's exactly the computing power that Tony is talking about there. And, you know, when it comes to this 5G, we've often spoke about the sentient world simulation and how the D-Wave that we theorize this sentient world simulation lives on Well, it's hungry for data. And we've been talking about all these billions of antennas that's going to be in every single device all around us, everywhere we go. There will be no escape from this full immersion. Even rural areas, you heard Tom Wheeler saying it, they will not be immune from this either. And it's easy done because you just stick these kind of lollipop antennas anywhere you like, 250 meters apart. And all of that, all of our data from our smartphones, even smart trainers now that sync up with your smartphone. I'm not making this stuff up, but all of that, all of the data, the ones and zeros, been fed all the way back into that sentient world simulation. And what does that enable? Even better predictive capabilities from a quantum computer as to what we will do. Talk about the ultimate control system, Anthony.
Yeah, so let's give them one last number here, and that's the 14th model. That is equivalent to 17G. Okay, we're talking about the fact that they have advanced way beyond 5G. Okay, we talked about a rollout slated for 2020 for 5G. I'm telling you, folks, there are 14 of these adiabatic quantum computer models. And at 14, it's equivalent to 17G. And the number of qubits, 10,485,576. Now, the number of human brains that all that equates to, 14,336 billion human brains with an existing computer, not science fiction. So you want to be able to track everybody with the Mark of the Beast system? It's already here, folks. They already have the quantum computer that does that. And it's accessing parallel dimensions out in that 10 million range. It's actually 2 to the 10 millionth power of parallel dimensions that it's accessing.
Tony, give it its Rose terminology, a mind-boggling number of parallel realities. But, I can back you up on this, right? And I can prove, kind of from my own experience, how the military are so much further ahead than the public ever know. And that was when I was serving in 95. And unbeknown to me, they didn't explain how it was done at the time. I later went on to learn about something called HARP. But they were telling me about the use of over-the-horizon kind of radio transmissions and how we were able to utilize the stratosphere. Now, they never explained really why you could bounce signals up and down off the stratosphere, Tony. But, of course, they were hinting and tipping their hat to the fact that they'd already weaponized it. HARP, stuff like that. And this was a long time before it started coming out on the internet and things like this.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to segue over into, instead of leaving it to the end, why don't you give one example of the new Internet of Everything device, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
I think we really should. And it's at this point, Johnny Whistles, I have to bring you back into the mix here because, well, this Internet of Things, we've covered it before with Nano Girl, right? And we thought we'd seen some pretty insane devices, didn't we?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? The thing is, the amazing thing that caught me about the Internet of Things, Kev, was when they were able to hack into someone's, I think it was someone's refrigerator, to talk to another device and then talk to another device to take over this certain device that they were after. That kind of thing, Kev, the Internet of Things, I thought it was going to be just everything kind of a talks, I mean, like the way they've got bulbs, you can turn your light on from your smartphone and things. That's what I thought the Internet of Things was, but, my God. I honestly couldn't have imagined it, Kev. It really is insane.
It really is, and we used to have a laugh and a joke about some of the things that may or may not exist, but I'm not going to go for the really number one craziest device that I've come across yet. But this one here, this will serve as an example, Johnny. And, the amount of times that this has really irked me when I've been out the house, I can see why somebody invented this, right? because they've now got an app that allows you to never lose track of your eggs again. Do you ever wonder what your eggs get up to when the fridge door is closed, Johnny? With the quirky Egg Minder wing cap enabled smart egg tray, try spitting that out, you never have to worry about that again. Because this egg tray syncs with your smartphone to tell you how many eggs you've got at home, because actually opening the fridge and taking a peek would be way too out there in 2016. Judging by the number of one-star reviews on Amazon for this device, it appears that the egg-buying public are not so yet convinced by the merits of this connected egg tray. So, Johnny, there's one example of just the utterly insane kind of contraptions and, air quotes, smart devices that are coming out. And all of this feeding back information to God knows where.
I mean, how daft does that even sound, Kev? Do you know what I mean? Just, I'll let you know when somebody's taking an egg out your egg tray. Do you know what I mean? Send you a push notification or something. Do you know what I mean? Then you can call the police and send them to your house and arrest this egg thief. Honestly, it is just absolutely nuts. It's like the toilet one as well, Kev. Do you know what I mean? It just gets really stupid. The amount of amazing things that could be done, and this is what we're getting.
Absolutely, Johnny. Am I still there? I can't even see if I didn't know my Skype button, my mute button's muted there. But Johnny, we've got a couple of minutes before the break, right? Myself and Anthony, we were absolutely howling at this next one. And, you know, this absolutely takes the biscuit, if you pardon the pun. Because get this, folks, and I know all of you out there have been absolutely itching to do this, but you now can share your rectal temperature with the world. That's right, folks. They have gone and made a smart rectal thermometer, Johnny, because, you know, everyone wants to share their rectal temperature online, right?
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that we talk about in our break, Kev. Do you know what I mean? Just how warm our rectum really is. But there you go there. Oh, Kev.
I think that'll about deal with it, Tony.
Yeah.
We can always count on Johnny for the bullets.
But, you know, when it comes to something like this egg tray, I imagine, right, if you look into the patent for this thing, it's probably got a microphone in it somewhere. And when you buy it, you sign up to the fact that you're allowing it to listen to your conversations anytime you're in the kitchen.
Yeah, you know what? I was reading something that just confirmed our suspicions about these AI devices in our home, these assistants. They actually broadcast sound waves to track your bodily movements throughout your home. So now they're going to track your bowel movements in your home.
Your bowel movements. And no, folks, it's not Hangar 18 Redux. It's not Freaky Friday. This is the real deal. These things are on the market. 5G is real, and on a serious side, it's set to impact us all. Now, we'll be back on the other side of the break when my man Musk, he's at it again, isn't he? Robots are going to kill us all. Join us after the break.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, everyone. I want to thank each and every one of you for hanging out with me, Kev Baker, Anthony Patch, and of course, the one and only Johnny Whistles tonight, right here on the Kev Baker Show. It's been a blast yet again. Before the break, some may say I was talking absolute crap, and I nearly was, literally. But now, before we get back into it, and yet another warning from my man crush himself, yes, that's right, Elon Musk, back in the media. Tony, there's a big conference coming up in September, and I'm very proud and honoured to be a very small part of that.
You're a big part of it.
Well,
you're a big part of it.
Little big part.
All right. Well, thank you. If the audience will bear with me for a moment, I want to just do my infomercial bit here. So September 16th and 17th, we're doing a live stream event. It'll be available through anthonypatch.com. I'm only going to go through the list of the Saturday topics that we're going to present and the speakers that will be presenting them. Saturday, we're calling evidence. This has to do with a divine battle plan utilizing the principles and strategies from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. So the evidence will present in that context on Saturday. We will talk about the threat matrix from our good friend, the engineer Sidney Burns. He will be presenting the threat matrix that Kev and I were privileged to be a part of assembling this matrix. And basically, it's a chart that lists all of these existential threats to humanity, including 5G. So that will be the threat matrix. Then we will have our good friend Alana Freeland back. She will be talking about full spectrum dominance, which is the title of this conference, Full Spectrum Dominance, and she will go through the latest information. None of this is going to be a rehash of information that they presented on the Kev Baker and Anthony Pat shows recently over the last couple of weeks. This will be new tip of the spear information from each speaker. After Full Spectrum Dominance, we will have Dane Wigington speaking about terraforming. And he is, of course, known for the geoengineering operations that are going on around the planet. He's going to specifically talk about terraforming for about an hour. Again, new information. Then we will have David Heavener, our Hollywood producer friend, who will be speaking about predictive programming in the media, Hollywood and television and commercials, predictive programming. And then Clyde Lewis, our friend from Ground Zero Radio, he will be speaking about the occult origins of technology, something that he has quite a bit of background in. So the origins of occult technology by Clyde Lewis. And then I will wrap it up at the end of the day speaking about artificial intelligence and, of course, 5G. And it will be well beyond what I've just presented here today. Thank you, Kev, for the opportunity to promote the Full Spectrum Dominance Conference live stream September 16th and 17th.
That really is. Over the 2 days, that really is going to paint a very full picture on so many of the topics that we cover here on our two shows and Freaky Friday as well. And Tony has gone out there and he's sourced some of the very best speakers himself, David Heavener and Robbie, working very tirelessly, as are others, to put this together. Like I say, it's just a pleasure to be a part of it in any way that I can. Now then, let's get back into it, because yes, that's right, my love-hate relationship was reignited today when I found out Elon Musk was back in the news. And, you know, I must qualify this before I even go on here, because people are like that. And I've seen it in the chat, and they're rightly saying, you know, Elon Musk, he's part of the problem, Kev. And I get where people are coming from there. And I made a video today, and I said as much. But at the same time, you know, when you watch him speaking about these things, he's hesitant. There's something biting away at his head. And I give him the benefit of the doubt. And when it comes to innovators and doers, I mean, Elon Musk is right up there. He comes up with really out there ideas like reusable rockets and colonizing Mars. And he's only clever enough and got the money to go and do it as well. And I do like his ideas with the Hyperloop and these factories with the batteries and everything else like that. But at the same time, I see the problem he presents. And he's back with 116 of his peers today, speaking in a letter to the UN. And it says here, just from the article I made today, yet again, Elon Musk, along with many other tech chiefs, are warning against the rise of robots, claiming it will lead to the third revolution in warfare. The warning comes in a letter from the International Joint Conference on Artificial Intelligence. And Sky News were reporting that billionaire Elon Musk has added his voice to 100 tech leaders in a letter to the United Nations, warning that killer robots could become weapons of terror. Urging the UN to take action, 116 artificial intelligence leaders and robotics companies from across 26 countries signed the open letter. Launching the International Joint Conference on Artificial Intelligence, the founders stated lethal autonomous weapons threaten to become that third revolution in warfare. And in the video, I was stating that when it comes to the military-industrial complex, This is exactly why they've invested so much money in robotics in recent years, because this is the way that warfare is going. And when it comes to robots and stuff, and in particular these weapons of war that Musk and others are talking about, this genie, it's well out the bottle. It's an analogy that we use all the time, but it literally is. There's no taking this back. And hypocritically, if you look at Elon Musk's factory, the Tesla factory, what's it dominated by? It is robots everywhere. So here's a guy building robots, got a big kind of handle in the robotic kind of industry, and he's warning against robots. And at the same time, they're warning against AI as well. And even DeepMind, we've covered the AlphaGo machine that beat the world's top Go player. They weighed in on this. They've added their weight to this letter as well. And they're saying we need to stop this. And they even quote Greek mythology in Pandora's box, because they go on to say that, I'll just find it here, we do not have long to act. Once this Pandora's box is opened, it will be hard to close. And what's really going on here, folks, is that all of these warnings from Musk and from so many others out there, and then the way that the mainstream hype them up, it's all for a purpose. They're purposely hyping this threat. And I'm not taking away from the threat because it's real, but they want to make sure that people are scared. They're in fear of what's lying round the corner with this robotic revolution, and they're creating a problem. And what happens when you have a problem? People seek a reaction. And it's going to be Musk and the people who are issuing the warnings about AI and all of the technology that will be the people that offer up the solution. And that solution will probably be the government regulating them and making sure that they're doing it okay, right? Because the government are watching at that point, well, everyone will go back to sleep. And we've all seen how Elon Musk intends to make sure there's a symbiotic relationship between man and machine. He talks neural lace. He talks literally integrating us into that system. So when you hear Musk and others warning about these things, for me anyway, it's all problem, reaction, solution. Create the hype. People will cry out, rightly so, for some kind of blocker on these killer robots. The most effective killing machines mankind have ever seen. We need to stop that. And of course, they'll have that solution ready. It's quite simple, Whistles, when you watch this same kind of tactic being played time and time again.
Yeah, Kev. I mean, the thing about Elon Musk, he does warn us about these things. The other people who are doing this kind of thing, they're not, Kev. And I would rather face a robot that's going to take my job than face a robot that decides whether I live or die.
You know, I was showing one today from South Korea, Tony, and this was called The Method 2. I've seen some far out kind of sci-fi films where you see these robot apocalypse kind of scenarios. I mean, this thing, it is giant. It must be about 15 foot tall. A human actually sits within the chest of this thing. Gigantic arms, gigantic legs. And it's like I said in the video, Tony, this thing isn't in the local mall to give directions to grandmothers when they get lost or anything. It's a killing machine, plain and simple.
Yeah, the whole movement, when we look at drones and we look at the super soldier discussions and the ability to enhance and augment the human body and the human mind for the soldier on the battlefield, but now it's a movement to drones, and the extension of that movement is the replacement of the human on the battlefield with killer robots. And it's not just the battlefield like you want to perhaps picture the sandbox in the Middle East. It's domestic. This is the ability to patrol the streets with robots of all types, sizes, and configurations and purposes. Some are just surveillance, and others will be interdiction. So police officers, your jobs are in jeopardy, that's for sure. But that's where the robots will be deployed throughout the neighborhoods.
Yeah, and this is where the 5G comes in as well, because they dress it up with the autonomous cars and stuff like that. But we're very close to a time where a lot more drones are going to be in the skies. And I've mentioned before something called the agile aerospace, and that's from the ground up to 400 feet. And that's the kind of aerospace that will see police drones and obviously the Google delivery drones, stuff like that. There'll probably be defibrillation kits headed out from hospitals. It'll be quicker than getting through traffic, good stuff like that. But this kind of agile aerospace, Tony, Johnny, this is going to really take off sometime very soon, especially when 5G rolls out. And it's all autonomous. And they're even saying how this could revolutionize the security industry, because you could have this set to patrol around neighborhoods on a set pattern, random patterns, land on some kind of recharging station, which will pop up, much like the 5G towers that are going to be everywhere, one would imagine, recharge and away they go again. And of course, that's your security guards, they're out of work. And of course, it's not going to be soaking up any of your data as it flies over the house, not like the Google cars when it's mapping your street light.
Well, you don't even need to have a charging station. With the broadcast of energy from, let's just call them cell towers, microwave towers, the drones can draw their energy directly from, as you said, the 5G soup, the millimeter wave transmission. This is Tesla transmitting energy around the planet through the ether. That's where we're at. We're in the ether right now.
Johnny, I'll bring you back in here, man, because we only get an hour with you, and this sounds very much right like the Matrix, that kind of scenario, doesn't it? Because there's no escaping this kind of 5G internet D-wave system that's upon us.
No, that's the thing that we kept talking about, Kev, that there is no way, because everything talks to one another now. So whether you wanted to try and hide, you may as well forgetting it, because they can see through walls, they can do everything with it now.
Absolutely. And you know, that letter that they've sent to the UN, Tony, it's talking very much as if all of this is a future tense, you know, these killer robots in the future, the AI that may be involved on the battlefield. But we can go back to Jade Helm. We keep on bringing it up, but it serves the purpose to show that even a few years ago, an AI was playing some part in a military drill. And whatever part it was playing, it learned from that. And a couple of years down the line, one can only imagine the kind of level it's at now. And we looked at just that one the other day from Elon Musk's company, OpenAI, that within the space of 2 weeks, it was able to go from no knowledge of a game whatsoever to beating the world's top professional player at something called Dota 2. And this is basically computerized warfare, right? So we can see that when they talk about it's almost too late, we're nearly out of time, they know fine well this problem's already here in the now.
Absolutely. The smoking gun to that is you and I look at the peer-reviewed papers, and we present that on our shows of the scientific information. Well, just the peer review process itself can take a year or more. So then they roll it out in a peer-reviewed paper in a scientific journal. And then eventually, maybe 6 months to a year later, some of the magazines like Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, will roll out the information into the more public domain. So then all of a sudden the public is aware of something like 5G. Well, 5G's been around at least 3 to 4 years based upon the process I just laid out for you. So the idea that this technology still needs to roll out, if we're talking 5G, out to 2020, or any of the other technologies, including the AI, including the robots, somehow still needing more time to fully advance the agenda of the rollout is pure nonsense. That is a distraction. When anybody starts saying, oh, it's 5 years out, 10 years out, that's nonsense. That's to distract you from realizing that it's already here.
And there was people in the chat room even confirming that earlier. I've seen some of them using 5G right now as well. So it is already here, folks. And Tony, you know, Elon Musk there, when he's talking about these things, we have to bring into the equation the neural lace. And I was reading today, 5 of the, air quotes, top neuroscientists in the world, they were offering their kind of theory on whether this could be viable technology. And bearing in mind, he's got the company Neuralink. A lot of them were kind of naysayers about the fact you could do this. Now, we often speak about this third strand of DNA. And I mentioned earlier on in the show that potentially 5G could well be the key to unzip that, unlock the double helix. And then with the nanotechnology that we're breathing via all the information from Dane Wigington the other night on your show, then potentially, and I'm not saying this is definitely happening, either of you, but potentially this is a neural lace type contraption in the making, right?
Definitely it is. And again, it's a distraction on Elon Musk's part to say that it is an injectable neural lace substance that will then float to the brain and adhere to the neurons. That's the scenario he has put out. That is a distraction away from the third strand of DNA that I've been talking about, writing about, publishing in my book since 2013. And you and I have talked about, and now we have Dane Wigington from Geoengineering confirming it. Now we have Max Egan last week on Thursday confirming it as well. People are finally, from their own independent research, independent from you and I, are coming to us and saying, hey guys, guess what I found? And we've been talking about it for 2 and 3 years. Now, that's just to illustrate to the audience that you and I do the deep research well in advance of anyone else bringing it out. I commend people like Dane Wigington and Max Egan for coming out with the information and confirming for us what we've been talking about. I'm not taking away from them. What I'm saying is this is reinforcement of the fact that third strand of DNA is a valid scenario, which means that through 5G, when they throw the switch, so to speak, they will activate the dormant nanoparticles that comprise the catalyst for the growth of the third strand, which will then result in people not even being aware that they've been changed. This is the mark of the beast system. It's not a chip in the hand. It is the third strand being activated by free will because you choose to go to the beast system.
And you know, I think there's another even kind of aspect to this as well, Tony, where it's going to be the ultimate deception where there is no choice. We've all been breathing this. We're all potentially ready to be pulsed with that energy. And like you say, people won't even notice. And it might manifest in little things like the kind of Mandela effect, not precisely, but little events where people start having kind of mismemories or something else strange starts happening where things have changed. Then, you know, that's probably the only symptom we'll get of it being switched on.
Well, that's a taste. That's the leading edge. That's the hint. This whole discussion that we've talked about regarding the Mandela effect, that's just the beginning of it. And what actually will happen is the changing of the memories that are contained, the historical memories that are contained in our DNA. Our brain is a processor. We've described it at length about the components of the brain being a quantum computer down at that quantum scale. Memories do not reside in the brain. They reside in the database, which is our DNA. The 5G will effectively erase and modify those memories contained in the DNA. This is why I say that people will not even be aware that they've undergone a change.
And you know, we often talk about synchronicity right here on Truth Frequency Radio on the whole. I think all of the audience and the hosts, we all experience this more frequently than others. And we're talking about this here, and Tony, we're talking about the changing of history. And we've compared it in the past to Ray Bradbury's work, Fahrenheit 451, the book burning. And we're seeing history almost changing before our eyes in some way with Mandela effects. But at the same time as they're doing that, and the books are all being digitized and the solid copies burned, right? Is it any coincidence then that just a couple of years ago we had ISIS going into Palmyra, ripping down all these religious kind of icons and stuff like that from ancient Christianity times, and now more recently in America? But similarly, we've got this kind of big debate over these statues, the Confederate statues that should or shouldn't be removed from towns around America. I mean, they're literally taking away the monuments as well.
They're erasing the historical record, because if you are in power, you get to destroy history and rewrite it in your interpretation of it as you want it to be. And if you can control history, you can control the present and the future.
Wow, Johnny, that's a deep one, that, isn't it? When you think about it, Mandela effects, things changing. We talk about them rewriting history, statues ripped away. And one generation, 2 generations down the line, there'll be, somebody I remember used to talk about ancient monuments over in Syria. There used to be monuments of George Washington in America, that kind of thing, John.
I think the world has just went crazy, Kev. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely nuts. It's like, why would you want to ruin something that's been there for 100 years? You know what I mean? If it was that bad, they would have ripped it down 10 minutes after they put it up. But no. Let's just go mad. We'll take down all the monuments. We'll start riots. You know what I mean? It's just doing exactly what they want us to do, Kevin. People are just falling for it.
It seems to me with the technology, Anthony, it's like an exponential curve. Bill Hicks, I think he described that curve the best by saying, it's just a ride. So you just have to sit back and just a ride.
It is. It's just a ride. We've put out a lot of information today and a lot of topics, but I really hope that people will participate in supporting the Entangled magazine and the live stream event that is hosted by Entangled magazine, sponsored by, which is our full spectrum dominance. And that topic is what we've gone through here today, is the full spectrum dominance of our lives at the quantum scale and all the way out to the macro scale. Kev, it can be disheartening, but this is God's plan. This is all happening according to the way God wants to play out. Satan really doesn't have any control.
I say this a lot, but I honestly wouldn't want to be alive at any other time than right now, because we've seen that eclipse today and they say it was the biggest show in the universe. I think life right now, it's the greatest show in the universe. And yeah, there's crazy times, there really is, but I think the information that ourselves and all the other hosts here on TFR successfully give to the listeners kind of in some way protects them and it shields them from what's coming at us. And at least we try to be at the very, very forefront of all the information we put forward. And, despite how dire it might sound sometimes when we're going over some of this information, never lose hope. Never, ever lose hope, because we really are. We're a crazy, great bunch. And somehow, like Tony says, it's God's plan. We will get through this. There is another side to this. And I always say, if they're wanting a new world order, we need to hijack that. Gordy Rose says we hijacked his dimensional ideas. Let's hijack the new world order. That's exactly what we need to do. And that's in some small part what we're doing right here. And, it's almost another show come and gone. We've got Lockie and Dr. Brooks Agnew coming up after the break. Don't go anywhere. And tomorrow night, right here on the network in hour number 2, we'll be joined by Dr. Eric Karlstrom. He will be on the show right here on the Kev Baker Show tomorrow. And then coming up on Tuesday, the 29th of August, mark your diaries, whistles, you are going to be grinning from ear to ear. But joining us live from UFO magazine in the UK, it's Gary Heseltine. He'll be back on the show in the second hour to go over all of the latest UFO type information coming from the UK. He's the guy, the go-to guy in the UK for all the kind of UFO stuff. Ben Emlyn Jones, he recommends him highly. He's been on the show before. And Johnny, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this one, right?
Oh, definitely. It was a fantastic show, the last one, I know, Kev. So, yeah.
I might just get him on for the 2 hours, John. What do you think? I might just go totally geek out alien style that night.
Yeah, I think you should, Kev. It's a great topic.
It really is. And of course, Anthony will be back with you on Wednesday night right here, right?
Absolutely, my friend.
Good stuff. You can find Anthony's work at anthonypatch.com. Thank you all again for tuning in tonight. And remember, wherever you are, make it TFR.
and dinna touch that dial.
God bless you all.
This is the Kev Baker Show. Seeking answers to age-old questions, deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back. I'm your host for the next 2 hours. I'm Kev Baker, and you are tuned in live to tonight's Kev Baker Show right here on TFR Live, Truth Frequency Radio. So then, I hope you've all had a good weekend. I hope you all survived today's solar eclipse. You know, we've been talking about it for weeks, and now it has come and it has gone. We're going to be getting into that in just a moment with tonight's special guest and, of course, more of a co-host on a Monday and a Wednesday right here on KBS. And that is, of course, Anthony Patch. And Anthony Patch, you can find his work over at anthonypatch.com. He spent 27 years as a paramedic up in Oakland, and more recently he's an author, researcher and public speaker. He's the editor-in-chief of Entangled magazine. He's putting together a conference as well. And of course, like I say, you can find all of this over at anthonypatch.com, including his books that he has there too. And Tony, Johnny Whistles will be joining us later on in the show. But I hope you've had a nice weekend, time to recover, and time for this eclipse today.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks, Kev. It's always good to be back with you. And I apologize to the audience for my banging on the keyboard. That was rather rude of me.
I thought one of Bill Gates's mosquitoes has made its way in the window. You were frantically trying to kill it, but all is good, Tony. All is good. Yeah,
you know, we had some issues. I hate to even bring it up again, but they slammed my computer, of course, 30 minutes before the show comes on the air. So I guess I was taking it out on the poor keyboard. But we're all good. We're here.
I've not really checked on this, but I would imagine the space agencies over in Europe, NASA as well, there are bound to be some kind of experiments they would be wanting to carry out when this is happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's always this opportunity to study the corona, which is what you were seeing in terms of plasma, the coronal mass ejections, the energy coming off of the surface of the sun, and the temperatures, being able to measure the heliosphere and the corona and the surface of the sun. So those kinds of instrumentations can be done during an eclipse that are unique, but they are planning on launching geosynchronous satellites above and beyond what they already have monitoring the sun, but satellites that will actually be positioned so that they create an artificial eclipse. Now, it's not an eclipse that's visible from the Earth, but an eclipse that is visible from the satellites themselves. So picture this. You have the sun, and then you have a nearby to the sun geosynchronous satellite in position that acts as a shield, acts like the moon, to eclipse the sun for a second satellite that is in alignment with the first one, so that the second one is experiencing the eclipse. So if you were standing on that second satellite, you would actually have an eclipse produced by the first satellite acting as a shield.
I was going to say, will that protect it from obviously some of the radiation that's going to be coming off there as well, right?
Yeah, and it's a smart idea because the satellites we already have orbiting the sun are always getting hit hard with streams of charged particles.
I like that idea, Tony. That is pretty cool physics. And, you know, when you look at some of these satellite images of the sun, I'm sure a lot of them can be put down to anomalies that are known probably within the software and the hardware itself. But there's always these questionable images where you see almost craft-like objects around the sun. And you know how I love to go to the TV shows, Stargate Universe, Tony. This is how they basically powered their ships. They would visit the local star.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the non-event, the eclipse, and we're going to get into 5G again because we must, and we got some clips to play, and we're gonna talk about the Internet of all things. You know, we hear about the Internet of things, but our good friend Sydney, our engineer buddy, that we developed the threat matrix diagram and process that he has presented to his national engineering organization. He calls it the Internet of all things, and I think that is totally appropriate. Go ahead, my friend.
All things, including us, because this is the full surveillance grid as well, Anthony. And not only that, with the nanotechnology that we undoubtedly have floating about in our bloodstreams as it is, I mean, we're looking at full integration into this thing sometime soon, willingly or unwillingly. And we'll get into that as the show progresses, but it would be remiss of us, right, if we did not mention this eclipse, this once in a century, once in a lifetime event that happened today. And I was watching, I think it's Sloosh, it's called, it's one of the online observatories. And
say that again?
Sloosh, I think it's Sloosh, I think that's what it's called.
I thought you were swearing again.
No, I wouldn't do that on air, Anthony. But yeah, like I was advising people to do anyway, right? I was a bit envious. I wasn't anywhere near totality. So I'd thrown my teddy in the corner and I was telling people, stay indoors, far safer, watch it on the live streams. NASA had a stream up as well. And Tony, you know, for all the mocking that I made of this astronomical event today, when totality did occur, and with the level of kind of cameras that we have in the year 2017, when that totality occurred and the full moon was blocking out the face of the sun, you get that corona that, or what is it, the Ouroboros, the kind of snake eats its own tail effect. But this time, you could actually see, you could physically see some of the jets of plasma coming off and going back to the surface of the sun. And from a geek point of view, somebody that loves space, it was amazing to watch that level of detail, Tony.
Yeah, and if we think back to the time of Einstein, you know, they used an eclipse to, quote, prove the theory of relativity insofar as gravity, according to Einstein, gravity bending light as light passes by large celestial bodies. So they yeah, go ahead.
Wasn't that Sirius or something that we seen from beyond the sun? Its light came round it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think today as well they were saying Sirius was visible in the sky, Venus and another one. And I'm just expecting, I haven't looked yet, Tony, but you know when we go to YouTube, these planets will be deemed UFOs, right?
Well, YouTube land is all honest. It's all truth. There's no fear there and there's no distortion.
Now, I did feel compelled today, though, and it's my dark sense of humour, folks, but I'll share it with you. Our good researcher, our link finder, Mr. Alistair, he was sending me links as this was going on, and there was an earthquake occurred at Yellowstone Park. Now, I was actually more shocked at the fact that people had chosen to go to Yellowstone Park, a volcano of all places, to watch the eclipse. Now, there's nothing new, folks, about earthquakes up at Yellowstone. There's 1,400 been recorded, I think, from June or July time. So there is a swarm going on there just now. But me, with my dark sense of humour, I was kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, you know, everyone's been going on about this panic that may or may not happen because of all this displacement of people. And you can just picture how people were reacting. You're up at the top of Yellowstone and the earth starts shaking. That would have been a sight to see. But, you know, Tony, they're saying this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, this whole moon blocking out the sun, the way it crossed over America, like that. But over here in Scotland, you know, I suppose it's more of an event when we actually get to see the sun in the sky. And Scotty Lopez, he suffered a similar fate today as well, because he actually went outside to try and film the eclipse. And, of course, the cloud cover was so much so that unfortunately you didn't get much of a view of anything. But it was quite spectacular when the places around the country were thrown into kind of darkness. And I think Tony's having some problems here with his Skype, but we'll get him back momentarily. But, how was this eclipse for you? Were any of yous out there in the path of totality? Anything like that? I remember we had one over here in Scotland when I was very young. I believe it was in the 80s sometime. And, there was no kind of HD camera shots like we were seeing today or anything like that. And I don't believe it was totality that we were in. But it is. It's something to see. And the Sky News in the UK, they were making a very big hullabaloo about all of this because they were kind of talking about they were going to speak to people watching the event and see how they felt spiritually pre and post eclipse. I mean, come on. I know I kind of milked it on Freaky Friday, but the mainstream media, they truly were taking it to the next degree. But Anthony, I was just sharing my dark sense of humour there and my almost laughter at the thought of people gathering at Yellowstone Park for an eclipse and then the ground starts shaking beneath their feet. Oh, that must have been funny.
I mean, pick a great spot. I mean, come on, use some common sense. Well, there were a bunch of people that went up to the top of the Great Divide, as they call it in the United States, the Rockies. Took a bunch of buses up there to go pray to the sun. So I don't know. It's much ado about nothing. I feel sorry, as I said on our show on Friday, that all these small towns that have been inundated by thousands and thousands of people coming in as early as Wednesday and Thursday last week. They were streaming in to these little towns, especially on the Oregon coast, and just overrunning the places. Can you imagine the litter, the destruction, the trashing of those little towns? All those people leaving, and they're leaving all their garbage behind. Nobody thinks about that kind of stuff. But the infrastructure is kind of what we're talking about tonight, and the damage that must be wrought on these small town infrastructures. That's just something that they don't even bother to talk about in the mainstream media. And again, it's much ado about nothing. People should have just stayed home and watched it on their computers.
And Tony, from a scientific point of view, you were mentioning Einstein and how he used this to almost prove his theory of relativity and gravity, the bending of light round objects. Now, today's